Welcome to Flipping Tables, where we bring all of our religious thinking to Jesus, who flips the table for his upside-down kingdom. I'm Julie Sexton, and I'll be your host.
Welcome to episode 32. Wow, 32 episodes. I think it's starting to sink in that we're actually podcasters. Friends, whether you have just found us or you've been with us from the beginning, thank you for listening and welcome to our table. I'm joined by my co-hosts, Julie Sexton and Kimberly Daniels, and I'm Twyla Brown. And speaking of our table, oh my goodness, we just had the best celebration meal together.
Was it a celebration?
Well, I mean, episode 32, Julie, we're really podcasters.
So we're celebrating that.
It was amazing. That was such a great meal. I feel so nourished and it was wholesome.
It was delicious. I mean, all of us like to cook, and so I feel like I'm always the one cooking for other people. I'm sure you feel that way.
Yes.
It felt like a treat that you cooked for us, Julie, so thank you so much.
Well, it was my pleasure, and it came together super, super fast, and it was our kind of food. It was a half-baked harvest meal, and I grew the tomatoes and the cucumbers, and it was just good. It was good. I enjoyed it.
It felt like a send-off to summer.
That is so true.
Mm-hmm. It was delicious.
It was a little garden celebration.
Our ode to summer. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. It was so good. I wish y'all could have. Well, we took pictures actually, so we will post pictures of this amazing meal. You should even put a link to the recipe for our people in case they'd like to try to replicate. But it was so amazing. I wish y'all could taste it. And I don't know.
You should tell them what you made. Describe the dish, please.
Describe the dish. Oh, that's on the spot. So we had a spinach and arugula salad topped with roasted, spiced cauliflower and garbanzo beans and the tomatoes, the cucumbers, a green goddess dressing that I made. I think grew a lot of the herbs too, so that was good. Grew the jalapeno, and what else
the feta?
Right.
Oh my gosh.
I'm the main
star of the show.
Yes, it had fried feta, like a panko encrusted feta cheese. That was so good. That you said this kind of tastes like fish.
Yeah, but that makes it sound bad.
It does make it sound
bad. It was hearty and meaty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely had some substance to it.
Yes, we weren't missing the meat.
Yes.
It was delicious.
And then we had a little pita on the side, so that was good.
So good.
I love to cook. I love to cook for people who appreciate it. That's a meal that my husband would not appreciate. Mm-hmm. And he would be like, "Where's the chicken or the beef or the stuff?" So it was fun to cook for you girls, and we got to just actually have small talk.
It was so good.
I know. We've kind of missed that lately. We've just all been so busy.
We have been very focused on work, getting in here and Twyla's got a new job, and your kids are in school and you're juggling a lot of things. And so for us to be able to get together and talk and spend time together was a real treat. So I guess it was kind of like a party today.
It was a party, girl. Thank you.
We wish all of our listeners were here with us to enjoy that meal. And we're so thankful for you guys listening and joining us. And we have been in this series of episodes on Mark for a minute. I want to give you a heads up that we are going to stick with Mark until the end of October. And this was not my original plan. But I will say, we do occasionally slip in an episode where we leave Mark or kind of dive into a topic like restoration. We did that a few episodes ago. But we're not going to go over every scene in Mark. But still, I hope that you have gained a deeper appreciation for Mark, and that maybe on your own, you might feel encouraged to read Mark and take it all in. In the Gospel Challenge, I know you and I, Kimberly, are, did you finish Luke today?
I did.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So tomorrow we start John to finish out the rest of, what month are we in? I started to say July, but it's August.
We're cruising through.
We are cruising through. And so I can't wait to start John tomorrow, but it's just guys, we want you all to be women and men who are in the Word, studying and soaking it up. And in case you're new to Bible study, or you've never really done a deep dive into a passage or a book, I want to give you a couple of tips and a little bit of encouragement. I'm one of those people who really loves the Bible, so I have a whole bunch of them. I bounce between several different Bibles, and one of my Bibles is a study Bible. And in a study Bible, at the beginning of each book, there might be a few pages of an introduction. And the introduction will include some information about the author, when it was most likely written, maybe even some of the themes, and possibly an outline. And I'm bringing this up because I think you should all check your Bibles to see if you have an introduction in those, and you should read those. When you set out to study a book of the Bible, I think you should read the outline. And I think you will find that it is extremely helpful. And I use the outline in the Bible and refer back to it often. And I've done that a lot with this Mark series. Again, I told you, I'm a Bible junkie. I'm a guru, like have stacks of them. But every Bible doesn't have an introduction. So one of my go-to Bibles that I carry with me a lot, a little thin line type Bible, doesn't have that introduction. So that's some of my tips. I think if you can, invest in a study Bible and, pay attention to those introductions and all those extra bonuses, the maps and articles, notes, commentary, the things that are in there. They're all there to help you to read and study the Bible. And why do we read and study the Bible? We do it to know God. And you are more able to know God personally and more deeply from studying the Bible on your own. My prayer is that when you listen to me or the three of us talk, it will make you aware of a spiritual hunger that is within you. And I began praying a long time ago that God would give me a hunger and thirst to read and study the Bible so that I could know Him. And I would encourage you, if you've never prayed that way, to maybe start with a prayer similar to that. And then just open your Bible and, if possible, again, invest in a study Bible.
Well, friends, you have to invest time into feeding your soul. Reading a devotion or, going on Bible posts, they're not going to get it done. The devotion is something that you read that someone wrote out of the overflow of their heart and their time with the Father. And, those encouraging posts and reels we all love, they make us feel really spiritual and good, right?
They do. We enjoy those.
Right? And I do love those. And I do think that they do speak to us sometimes and give us encouragement that we need. But someone worked hard on their relationship with the Lord to have something to share with us. And salvation is a free gift, but growing your salvation is going to cost you something. And I was listening to you talk, and it was making me think about a conversation I just had with my little mentor group of girls, my middle school girls that I mentor once a week. And we're in a little study, but I had told them this past week, I said, we have 2 more episodes of this, guys. And then I think what we need to do is just study the Bible. I said, nobody taught me to study the Bible when I was your age. In fact, it's something I just had to fumble through as an adult and kind of learn myself. And I think that that would be the best thing I could do for you is let's just sit down and we're going to start with the gospel. And we're going to study it. And I'm going to show you how to, when you read over something and you're like, wait, what? And so you just keep going. No, stop. Like, figure it out. And so I'm hoping that I will give them the gift of, knowing how to study the Word and them being able to make that investment in themselves and their relationship.
I think that's so good. And I got so excited when you said that because we've not talked about this. But this means this is going longer than summer Bible study.
It is.
That is so exciting.
It's a TBD. There's no end date. We have
great.
a group chat and everything. Yeah.
So you're legit.
That.
And they text me back the other day when I did my little, thinking about you guys today. They actually text me back. So I think they might think I'm cool.
Oh my gosh. Don't blow it, Twyla.
I know. None of them are listening, so they won't know.
You don't know that.
I don't know that they know about this. I'll have to tell them.
Yeah, you should tell them. Invite them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really valuable, though, because I think when I was younger, too, I would just kind of open the Bible
Bible
and be
roulette.
like, yeah, what is God going to say to me in page 743? You know?
Right,
And
yeah.
you need to learn how to break down passages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Awesome.
So do you guys use like the outline in your, do you guys have study Bibles? I'm sure you do.
I do. I mean, I don't geek out on it as much as you do. But I have, when you were saying that, it reminded me of the videos for the Bible recap whenever we start a new book. And I've learned
The Bible Project.
Yes, the
Yeah.
Bible Project videos for every book of the Bible. I've learned a lot. It really sets the stage. So I think context is key. And it really gives you knowledge about the context.
And frankly, that's an awesome tip. I'm so glad you brought that up because you don't have to do the Bible recap to go and find the
Video from the
videos.
Bible Project.
Yeah. Yeah, the Bible Project videos. Those are available. You
They're
can,
amazing.
and they are fantastic. They are something that I will go to, and if I remember, I'll be like, oh, I should go watch that video before, I read, James.
Right. Or even if you're not at the beginning of a book, just to learn about the author and what's going on in history.
Yeah. And because it's in a video and they're engaging and there's a visual that goes with it. So if you're thinking, I don't have a study Bible or I have a study Bible and that is just too hard for me, these videos
That's
are a great
option.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll have to link to those too.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Remind me to do that.
I'll write it down when I'm editing.
Got a lot of links this week.
She does leave me some good notes. I appreciate that. She helps me so much with the show notes and reminds me of things that I should include. And we would be nowhere without Kimberly because she does the editing.
She keeps us in check.
We all have our role to play.
Oh,
We make a good team.
A funny story about that before we get into the lesson. My mom said, in last week's episode, the one that aired this week, she said, you were talking really slow. Kimberly needs to speed you up. And I was like, Mom, that wasn't Kimberly. That was me. I said, I was talking slow because I was doing the lesson portion and they weren't with me. I talk probably it changes when you're in an empty room by yourself doing something rather than having two girls sitting here at a table with me.
That's true.
My energy is definitely going to be up. So I thought it was funny when she said that.
Oh, well, you can speed it up on your podcast. Sometimes when I was listening to myself from last week and I was like, wow, I sound really tired and slow. I was like, I would have to put that on double time.
That is another good tip.
There you go. We're full of them today.
Because, when you're listening to an audiobook, you can set the speed for that. You can set the speed in the Bible. Change I think we mentioned that. You can change the
things that we're just now
the voice.
discovering.
The voice, yes.
The voice of the word.
Yeah, and I've been listening to the Message, but I've been listening to Annie F. Downs read it. And I have it open and going through it at the same time. And that's
You do not need to put her on double time, though.
No, you don't.
You might need to slow her down.
She is my hero. Like
Can she please read the whole Bible?
We need you to read the whole Bible,
Yes.
Annie. We do. Okay, so in this episode, we are going to be going over Mark 8, 11 through 21. And when I looked at the outline in my Bible, it tells me that Mark 7 through 8:21 is a section with a focus on true holiness and the inclusion of the nations. And as we have been working our way through Mark, a couple of the places that we've landed in Mark 7 have been specifically about the inclusion of the nations. We did a lesson on the Canaanite woman's faith. Remember the crumbs? We did a lesson on Jesus healing a Gentile man who was both deaf and mute. And then we did an episode on Jesus feeding the 4,000, which was that Gentile crowd. So all of those, we really focused on the inclusion of the nations. And in this lesson from Mark 8, verses 11 through 21, we will have the opportunity to focus on true holiness. I've mentioned before that the disciples had faith that was a work in progress. the disciples are still demonstrating some hardness of heart and some spiritual blindness. And Jesus has been addressing their hearts, and he's going to go further to address the blindness. Because in the next section of Mark, Jesus will begin to teach them about a new exodus. The new exodus involves leaving religious ways for the way of the crucified Lord. Listen, Jesus is taking the table flipping up a notch, and we are about to level up in our journey of following the table flipper. So after Jesus walked on water, and he climbs into the boat, Mark tells us that they had not understood the miraculous meal because their hearts were hardened. It's one thing that the Pharisees refused to see what was happening because their hearts were hard, and they are most definitely exhibiting this spiritual blindness because they didn't want to see anything that Jesus was doing. They just wanted to stop him. So when we get to Mark 8:11 through 13, the Pharisees are back and they begin to question Jesus. Kimberly, do you want to read those?
Mm-hmm. In verse 11, it says, "The Pharisees came and began to question Jesus. To test him, they asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and said, 'Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly I tell you, no sign will be given to it.' Then he left them, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side."
Okay, so the key words in these verses are in verse 11, to test him. The Pharisees were behaving like their ancestors had in the wilderness. Their ancestors had these hard hearts and didn't believe God. And now this is what the Pharisees are doing. And in verse 12, Jesus sighed deeply. The question wasn't sincere. They were just trying to test him. Their ancestors had this sign of the manna and water from a rock, yet they still had these hardened hearts. And whether the Pharisees had been there for the feeding of the 5,000 or not, the crowds were talking. The news of what Jesus was doing was spreading, and these miraculous meals were something that only God could do. This was a huge messianic sign. Yet, here they were asking for a sign. And when the Pharisees saw a miracle, they like to say things like that Jesus had done that miracle by Beelzebub. Remember the whole Beelzebub controversy? They would scheme and spin and plot about what Jesus did, and they would try to give Satan credit for the signs that Jesus was doing. And this was because their hearts were hard, and hard hearts result in unbelief. So Jesus, he just got back into the boat with the disciples. Remember I said this section of Mark is about holiness? We're getting to the holiness in this lesson. And when I read the word holiness, I think about being set apart. And that's what's happening. Jesus has gotten his disciples in a boat, separate from the religious leaders, the ones who thought they were just crushing holiness. They thought they had this all figured out. And that takes us up to verses 14. Kimberly, can you read verses 14 through 16?
"The disciples had forgotten to bring bread, except for one loaf they had with them in the boat. 'Be careful,' Jesus warned them. 'Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod.' They discussed this with one another and said, 'It is because we have no bread.'"
The disciples have been with Jesus at these big miraculous meals, and food provisions for trips has become something of a really big deal. And bless their hearts, they're a little stressed out over this one loaf of bread. So when Jesus brings up the yeast of the Pharisees and that of Herod, they completely miss what Jesus is warning them about, because they're all spun up about being caught with not enough food. Friends, they are traveling with Jesus. This should not have been something that they were worried about. They should be saying, "I can't wait to see what he does with this one loaf of bread." But that's not what they're doing. What happens next is Jesus is going to enter the conversation. He's going to start with the bread, and this is Jesus 101. Jesus using ordinary circumstances to teach a spiritual lesson that comes out of, I mean, it's kind of like, it comes out of, if Jesus had a teaching manual on how to make disciples, this would be a page out of the book. He read the hearts and intents of the Pharisees. He got in the boat with the disciples who were having a minor breakdown over only having one loaf of bread. So Jesus pulls out another lesson from his manual and uses another boat ride to teach them some of the same lessons again. You know, a side note, this is what patience looks like. He doesn't yell at them. He's very calm. It's like he's just like, okay, guys, let's just take a breath. Let's review. What's Jesus trying to teach them? To be careful of what? What's the yeast of the Pharisees and Herod? And we're going to get to that in a minute. But Twyla, you haven't read anything. How do you feel about reading?
I'm here for it.
Okay, why don't you read 17 through 21?
All right. Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, "Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you still not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened? Do you have eyes but fail to see and ears but fail to hear? And don't you remember? When I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up?" 12, they replied. "And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up?" They answered, 7. He said to them, "Do you still not understand?"
Thank you. So first, let's kind of back up and talk about the yeast of the Pharisees. And the yeast of the Pharisees is hypocrisy. The Pharisees elevated their man-made teachings over God's law, so they couldn't see or believe in what Jesus was doing because, again, they were hard-hearted and spiritually blind. Everything Jesus was doing was an affront to their teachings. When the Pharisees would accuse Jesus of breaking God's law, Jesus wasn't actually breaking God's laws. He was breaking their man-made laws. Their man-made rules needed to be broken down because they were barriers put in the way of people who were trying to come to God. And so the disciples had been immersed in the Pharisees' man-made laws their entire lives. So Jesus was flipping the tables in their lives. Jesus was teaching them a whole new way of life. And I understand why this is so hard for them. If any of you have grown up in a very legalistic church like I did, it takes time for all of that legalism and bad teaching to get out of you. Listen, when I came to Jesus, I had so many twisted and erroneous teachings that were drilled down inside of me that needed to be uprooted. And if this resonates with any of you, then you know if rules upon rules is what's been sown into you, it's very hard for Jesus to get in. All of that just, for me, it kept getting in my way. It was an obstacle. Coming to Jesus for salvation was so hard for me. Just to begin with a gospel that is as simple as it really is, that it's a free gift that has nothing to do with you, that seems nearly impossible. But nothing is impossible for Jesus. So make no mistake, it's hard for a religious person to get saved, but it's not impossible. This is what Jesus is working with the disciples. They have, again, been steeped in this, and he separated them, so that's why he's got them in this boat. In Mark's gospel, when Jesus got in the boat with the disciples, Mark is writing in a way that shows Jesus is shifting his discipleship efforts to uproot religion from his disciples. He's going to be teaching them about this new exodus that involves leaving religious ways for the way of the crucified Lord. And the hard spots in their hearts and these blind spots have to be dealt with. Just like Jesus had to do that with me. This is what he's doing when he asked, "Do you still not understand?" I love the way Mark writes, because the very next thing Mark writes about is a 2-step healing. for a man that is blind in Bethsaida. So listen to these verses. This is the very next verses in Mark 8. In verse 22, they came to Bethsaida, and some people brought a blind man and begged Jesus to touch him. He took the blind man by the hand and led him outside the village. When he had spit on the man's eyes and put his hands on him, Jesus asked, "Do you see anything?" He looked up and said, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." Verse 25. Once more, Jesus put his hands on the man's eyes. Then his eyes were opened and his sight was restored, and he saw everything clearly. Okay, friends, Mark's making a point. This isn't a random healing placement. A two-step healing followed by a boat ride with Jesus is actually just some Jesus math. The disciples, remember in the boat, were like, okay, we have one loaf of bread. And Jesus, I just picture him quietly shaking his head. Guys, it's not about the bread. It's about your blind spot. And then he walks them through those two miraculous feedings. Remember, he said, when I broke the 5 loaves for the 5,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? 12. Okay. And when I broke the 7 loaves for the 4,000, how many basketfuls of pieces did you pick up? They answered, 7. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that the very next miracle that Jesus does involves 2 steps. He's working on those hard spots in their hearts, and he's working on their blind spots. When Jesus says, "Do you still not understand?" Again, he's not upset with them. He knows that they are going to get it, and he's going to stick with them. Jesus is working the yeast of the Pharisees out of them. He's committed to getting them to true holiness. And friends, Jesus is committed to breaking through all of the blind spots of all of his followers. We'll be diving into a series of episodes about leaving our religious ways and learning about following the way of our crucified Lord.
That is so good. I loved this week, you guys. This message really, I don't know, like, you know, when I read through it, I was excited for it, but like, this was so good. So thank you for bringing this. And I hope that this encourages and inspires our listeners to examine, do they have anything they need to work through, and ask God to reveal any blind spots that they might have, but also that they'll also feel inspired with, you know, just our conversation around the word and really digging in and using those resources and putting in their own effort and time. So I hope you guys feel encouraged and excited. I know I do. And as always, let's wrap up with our bright spots. I gotta say, my bright spot, you know, the reason that I wasn't with you last week, my husband got a new knee. So
He got a new knee.
We now have 2 new knees. He had one in January, I guess, of 2022. And here we are for the second knee, and it has gone really well. It actually, I feel like, has gone smoother than that first knee. And I don't know if it's the procedure or maybe we just knew what we were doing this time, but things are going remarkably well at my house considering all things. So it's just been a bright spot to see that something that I was kind of dreading and like, you know, just thinking like, oh gosh, here we go again. It's been so much better than I anticipated. And I know that you've had some prayers for me, so I appreciate that. We've definitely felt that, and God has been good.
I just wonder if Stefan would say it was his bright spot. It just kind of makes me laugh a little bit.
We'll talk to him in about 6 to 12 months.
Because that's not an easy surgery. Both of my in-laws had knee replacements this year. My mother-in-law had 2 done just a few months apart, and my father-in-law had 1 done too. And actually, I think they're getting ready to have a party for their PT people because they've been taking such good care of them.
They become like family. This lady comes 3 times a week to our house. So, and he's excited. He's going to be doing his in-office physical therapy starting next week, and he gets to be with the same guy, Yusuf, that helped him with the first one. He's like, is Yusuf still there? And like, you know, super stoked about it. So yeah, I could see how that would be.
Yeah. When my husband was like getting some like outdoor games together, and I was like, "What are you doing with those? Why are you putting those in your truck?" And he said, "Well, I'm taking them out to my parents' house because they're having this party for their physical therapist."
I love that.
And the whole crew. And I said, "That's amazing. They have like really bonded with them. So now you need to have a party for your people.
I'll make them a cake.
Make them a
That's
cake.
what I'll do.
That's
I'll make
a
them a
flipping
cake.
tables thing that we approve of.
Are you going to make it knee shaped?
Maybe. I don't know. Oh, that might be out of my wheelhouse.
Well, it's a circle.
Right.
As long as it has buttercream, it doesn't matter, right? Kimberly,
What about you?
Well, on the drive over here, I just finished a really good book that I know you're reading too. The Russell Moore book, Losing Our Religion.
Oh, yeah.
And it was difficult to read, but the ending was just a bright spot for me. And he talked about some of the passages that we talked about today and the new Exodus. And I was just thinking about that while you were reading it. And it was bright for me because there are a lot of people who have given up, and there are a lot of people who have been hurt and wronged. And then there are people who haven't given up, and we're those people. Like, we haven't given up, and we're looking up to people who haven't given up either. So just there's always a remnant, there's always hope, and there's always Jesus. So I know that was like a Sunday school answer.
That was so good. No, Kimberly, because it's on my list. I actually told Julie, I'm like, when you finish your book, can I have it? So
Yeah, because I ordered
It's
the
worth
book.
it.
And the funny story was I got the copy on sometime over the weekend. And as I was like, just flipping through it, there was a page that was ripped out of the middle of it. Like, there was like half a page that was gone. And so I had to do like an Amazon return and get a new book. And it came the next day, but I went ahead and started reading the one. But I've stepped away from it for a day or two. So I'm looking forward to, I'll probably read it this weekend. But I look up to him so much, like him and a Beth Moore, people who had like positions and were involved with a lot of people, for them to talk about being homeless or some of the stuff that they've gone through. I hate that they've had to go through that, but God, thank you so much for having people of influence that are writing and speaking into it like he does in this book. It's really encouraging. I could see why that would be your bright spot.
Yeah. What about you, Julie?
Okay, well, my bright spot actually is about books too.
We love books here.
We do love books, but
I don't love books. Just for those of you that are not book readers, it's okay.
I've not been reading a lot of fiction books over probably the last 10 years or so. I just didn't have time, or honestly, I felt like maybe there was some kind of like, I just felt like I needed to like be learning. And so I needed to like read books more like that. And then I took a long break from books. So it's really funny that there was a whole period of time that I only read the Bible. I didn't read, books that were based off the Bible or anything like that. I was just like really wanting to know what I believed from the scripture. And when I felt released to start reading books again, and so now I'm looking reading all kinds of books. But I felt like this summer I have been just like wanting to read just good novels. And this series of books by Charles Martin, there was a 3-book series, and I have absolutely loved them. I think you've read them now, Kimberly, haven't you?
Not yet.
You haven't?
Well, now that I finished this book, I can start on those.
Okay, but it's about a guy who is rescuing people out of the sex industry, like human trafficking. Really, it's about human trafficking. He's rescuing children and women and boys and stuff that have been sold. But his mentor in this book would say to him, "Tell me what you know about sheep," when he first met him. And it kind of just like parallels so much. It's really like reading the gospel. Like Jesus would leave the 99 to go after the one. And that's the attitude that this guy has in the book. And it's so encouraging. It's so like he will go after the one because everyone matters. And I just love it. So it has just been a hard subject to read about, but it's so beautifully written, and there's such gospel hope in the midst of this book. So obviously he's a Christian author, and he's writing from this perspective, and I just love it. Loved these books. I devoured them.
Got another link for you, people. We're going to keep you busy this week.
So friends, no matter what you're reading, we hope it's the Bible. And we hope that this lesson has encouraged you and built you up. And we so wish that you could have been at the table with us, having our salads and just sharing in, our friendship and conversation. You would have been so welcome at our table. And we just want you to keep following the table flipper and leave the table flipping to Jesus.